pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Jim Hauss. Jim is the manager of quality assurance for the Raymond Corporation in Greene, New York, facility and manager of warranty administration for Raymond's North American operations. He has more than 25 years of experience in program management, quality, reliability, operations, and engineering, using systems and process-focused methodologies within a Six Sigma and lean manufacturing environment. Jim is experienced in diverse industries, including defense, electronic assembly, and pharmaceuticals. Jim is currently involved in the implementation of traditional Toyota production system philosophies at the Raymond Corporation, which is an integral member of the Toyota Materials Handling Group. Jim received a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. With postgraduate studies in infrared systems design, Jim has earned Green Belt certification in both systems engineering, design for Six Sigma, and certified process improvement facilitation. Please help me welcome Jim Hauss to the podium.
Thank you. Well, we're going to talk about TPS a little bit today. And in understanding what we talk about from a transition, you got to understand where we began. I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with Raymond. We make forklifts. If you've gone to Home Depot, Lowe's, you see these big orange things? That's what we make. We cut a lot of chips. We're a very vertical integrated company. We go through about 100 tons of steel pretty much on a daily basis. So we were founded back in 22. We've been around for 87 years. We were acquired by BT in 97. The important part of this from a TPS standpoint, we were acquired by Toyota in 2000. That's where the TPS information comes from, is that as with any acquisition, we get inundated with things from the new parent company, and it comes at you very quickly and in great amounts of massive information. And so we got management principles, all kinds of them. We got thrown all kinds of concepts that you're probably well aware of, but coming from a family-run organization with a very traditional approach to quality, this was overwhelming. We didn't know what to do with it. We had advisors showing up. We had cartons of books showing up. Great information, but any good idea that goes unimplemented is just another good idea. We had to figure out how to make it actionable. So what we did, we said, let's go find a champion. Let's identify someone who's going to go and learn these things and bring it back that we can understand and interpret it and make it actionable. So we found a champion. We found an individual who was willing to go to Japan, spent 3 months there, living it, brought back lots of great information for us, and tried to figure out how do we take these concepts and put them into our very traditional quality organization where we inspect quality into product. We took that information. We communicated across the business. We trained. We did all the things we were supposed to do right. And in a year, didn't see too much. What we learned, it's not a task. The TPS really starts to change. We had to figure out how to change the culture. And so we took a step back, said, okay, let's start simple. Why are we doing this? And this is the first thing that Toyota taught us. We're doing this to remain profitable, stay in business, make money. Okay, where do we begin? Productivity, waste was our primary target. Reduce costs, and to visualize problems. Those are the 3 keys that we wanted to focus on out of the gate. Let's start simple. We can build on it from there. Okay? I guess I stay up here. Kaizens. Let's get a process in place so we can begin to get involvement with our employees. That was important. We had to engage them and start to understand the basics of the philosophy we were really trying to drive. 5S, basic cleaning. Let's start to organize our business in such a fashion where it helps us and put some structure around it. And one of the things I'm going to spend most of the time talking about, Asa-Ichi meetings. What that is, and I'll go into more detail, is a way of identifying, visualizing, and beginning corrective action processes on our defects, and eventually transition into disruptions. And I'll talk more in detail about the difference between them, because they're huge in the way that we run our business. On the Kaizens, spend a few minutes. We did all the traditional things. We put together a database. Obviously, we got to track this stuff. If we can't track it, we don't know what we're doing. We trained. We set expectations. We set metrics and goals up. All the traditional things of how to approach it. We got some benefits from it. But we learned we had to do more. This is key. It wasn't good enough to put a process in place that the management didn't become part of the process. And again, this is pretty basic stuff, but we found out how important it was in the TPS world. We had to be involved. Recognition, reward, very basic things. Clear, consistent communication. The biggest thing that we had to make sure that we did was we had to be involved, we had to be on the floor, we had to get our butts out of our office and be on the factory floor. We had to show involvement, and we had to show that it was important. That was the biggest thing. Once we got out on the floor and we lived this, as opposed to just talking to it from letters from the office, we started to see a change in our actions. Trust. We've got to eliminate the fear. I'll show you some of the goals that we had set and the gains against them, and you'll see why. When people come up with ideas of how to eliminate 50% of their job for streamlining, we have to take away the fear that they're not going to lose their jobs, that we have other things for them. And we had to learn that. It was a learning process for us to truly understand that perception. We expect them to come back with all types of recommendations of how to streamline work, but without any promise that it would be okay at the end of the day, that it was good to do that. The next one, and probably the most I'll come back and harp on, was speed. If an individual comes up with a recommendation to do something and we don't act on it almost immediately, we send a message that it's not important. They stop feeding that engine of recommendations. We are expecting 1 Kaizen per employee per week. That's where we started off. We ended up this past year with 2 a day from every employee that we had once we got the engine going. And I'll show you some of the data that goes with that. Those are the things that we had to do to make the process work. The process didn't feed itself. We had to drive it. On the 5S, we did the same thing. We put a process in place. We trained. We set expectations. We set metrics. We got some things. We got some gains. Wasn't good enough. We didn't see the results that we really wanted to see. Seems to be a trend here. All the same things we learned about on the Kaizens, we had to do with 5S. Manager involvement, trust, and the speed of reaction to recommendations. We, as a management team, we control the resources, we control the priorities. We had to demonstrate our involvement by showing that it was important to do and that we could apply the resources and the priorities and the things that mattered to the people that were given recommendations. It was key. Now, I'm going to call these phases. They're really cycles of learning. But they didn't fit on this chart, so I made it easy. Every morning, we start off the day at 8:15 and we review every defect that we encumbered on the line the day before. This is where we started. This was at a customer perspective, finished product. So these are things that were going out the door. Anything that we found was something the customer would have found.
So who's involved in that meeting?
Okay? Initially, on day one, quality inspected the trucks, quality presented, and quality found the root cause and came back with countermeasures. The expectation is that within 24 hours, we came back with a root cause and a countermeasure for every defect. It wasn't good enough now with the Asa-Ichi meeting to say, I'm just going to go rework it, and at the end of the month, I'm going to go look at the data and go figure out how to fix things. The expectation on this was that within that 24 hours, we went back out in the line and figured out what happened and put a countermeasure in so it wouldn't happen again. Not only to, hopefully, to prevent it from happening again, but primarily to contain it and never allow it to get to that point. So phase one, walk before you run, inspect it, don't let it go on. Put a quality gate in place and begin to work the root cause in parallel. Now it's hard to see. Every defect, we've created these little strips of paper. Toyota is very big on handwritten things and the lack of, don't use computers, to be manually involved with things. Also, is that this first block, we'd have a picture in there of the defect. Everything is visualized. Not only do we have it on the strip, but we take a picture of the defect, and it gets walked over, and it's given to the supervisor of the area who gives it to the individual who caused the problem. So they can see the defect. It was very, very powerful. So we invested a lot in digital cameras. That, and we blew up a server trying to store everything. So they come in, and we fill out these strips, and we present them to each other every morning. Root cause, corrective action, containment, and a quadrant here that basically follows a plan, do, check, act. First one is assignment of responsibility. The second one is that they do containment, root cause, and the standardize of the corrective action. And so that's what's expected in the first 24 to 48 hours. So we began, and it looked like this. Simplified process. External suppliers provide us raw material, metal fab, welding, assembly, final inspection. We ship to a captive set of dealers. We don't ship predominantly to end customers. So we incorporated this first step into the final inspection block. And basically, quality was the only ones involved. We found the defect, we presented the defect, and we did our own investigation. We did that, this was August of 2007. This is where the journey began. Very rudimentary things. Once we figured out how to do this, because it took us about 6 months to really get a feel for how to do this immediate turnaround. What's your typical turnaround on feedback on the floor on defects? Ours was probably a couple days. It would take us to even validate the defect. All of a sudden, we turn the business on its side and says, not only do we have to validate the defect, but we have to respond to all the other attributes of that defect. Root cause, corrective action, containment, and get up in front of our peers and present that in the first 48 hours. The time frames, again, speed is key. We had to change all of our internal processes to be able to accommodate that ability to respond quickly. We didn't understand how difficult that was until we went and tried to do that. The 200 hourly people on the floor, another 150 in support organizations, the involvement of the people in a different way was critical, and we really didn't understand what it was going to take to do that. We struggled through that for 6 months to do that part of it. Once we learned that, okay, let's tweak it a little. Now, let's not make the quality department responsible for solving every problem. Once we find a problem, let's transition it back to the operations guys. They're the ones who are building the trucks. Let's feed it back to them. Let them start to solve their own problems. We facilitate the meeting. We support them in their problem solving. They're accountable. They're presenting the trucks to inspection for how good the truck is. They got to take responsibility. What a change in that environment, that they had to stand up in this meeting and present what they did wrong. What are they going to do to fix their processes, to do checks and audits of their own product before it's submitted to inspection? The accountability now transitioned from quality having to solve all the problems and identify the defects to now the operations guys who are building the trucks had to do that. The pain was different now, and the reactions to the activities changed dramatically. Now suddenly we had to talk to each other. Now inspectors had to talk to operators. Operators had to talk to inspectors. They had to understand the criteria. There was involvement from a different level than we've ever had before. The minute we got other people talking to one another, senior management from the different organizations now got involved. We start taking people, we start taking resources, we're solving problems on the floor. They're just not sitting at their bench working on exactly what they're supposed to do. They have to solve the problems too. The interactions are there. We influence resources. Senior management gets involved. So now we're talking, and at least at a different level than we had before. So we had final inspection. Now we got quality and assembly involved. Now we're starting to expand our scope. That took us about 4 or 5 months to understand how to do that well. Okay, we got that one going pretty good. Now what do we do? So it took us about 9, 10 months to be able to figure out how to do finished goods inspection on a truck as it goes out the door from a customer perspective. Okay? We went and did 2 things. Well, actually 3. We got some technical support organizations involved. Manufacturing engineering. We also transitioned from a defect, predominantly inspection-driven events, to disruptions. Huge difference. A disruption is anything that causes the operator not be able to do his job. Bad paperwork, lack of material, all the things that could happen that would keep him from being able to perform his job. In parallel to this, we transitioned to a continuous flow line, and so takt time became important. Was anything now was very sensitive to time. Anything that kept that operator from being able to do his job. So now all of a sudden we're starting to get shortages on the line and trying to drive root cause corrective action on why we don't have the material on the line. Was it mispicked? Was it missing? Wrong part? Purchasing got dragged into it. It started to incorporate other organizations. We also started to age the issues. Some of the low-hanging fruit was going away, and now we had to look at things from a different perspective. We started to get systemic issues, more process-related issues than we had initially. So some things took longer than 24 hours to solve. The other thing we started to do is we added another inspection further up the line for this data gathering process. Is that before we put all the covers on the trucks, we're going in there and checking the electrical connections, hydraulics, all the mechanicals, things that started to make a difference in the performance of the truck, not just the external view and the options. So we took a quantum leap in here. We really extended the depth of the process issues. Now we started to get into the core of some of the assembly issues and some of the engineering drawing related issues. So we got depth and breadth of organizations and problems. And every time we did this, all of a sudden we got different levels of senior management involved. And so again, the involvement on the floor, the presence and the detailed issues that we had to deal with from a senior management standpoint became much more interactive and much more powerful in terms of how we were starting to influence the entire business. So now we got 2 steps in the process, final inspection and 1 more inspection up the line. And we've got a few more organizations involved. So now we're about 1.5 years into this, and we've got a lot more people involved than where we were before, and we've encompassed much more of the process. Okay, another cycle of learning. We go through another couple months. Now what do? Let's start getting in some of the support organizations. We also want to focus on better containment. If we have a defect, we have a shortage, we're going to work all the way back up our line and find all the other opportunities of that occurring and address them, not just the point occurrence. Again, very basic building blocks of improvement or process problem solving, but we had to institutionalize it. We had to get people to think that they had to do it every time and hold them accountable and make them visually present back to us that they did it and show objective evidence. It's 2 things to say you did it. It's another thing to be able to show you did. And when they're standing there presenting, we're also critiquing and providing feedback. Not everything got closed just because you said you did it. The next phase will show you what we did about that. And we added disruptions for all the internal operations. And again, whoa, so much for my spelling. Again, we focus on expanding the depth and breadth of our efforts. And again, every time we did this, incorporated new organizations, other management wanted to get involved because they want to know where their people were disappearing to at 8:15 every morning. And how much time they were spending in solving the problems during the course of the day in preparation for not getting up and getting embarrassed in that morning meeting, not being prepared. So now, we're collecting all these disruptions from our entire operations from beginning to end that we have internally. And all these organizations are now responsible for doing root cause corrective action across the board. Very simple, dynamic events that we didn't understand the leverage that we were applying to the business. Next phase. We found that we were getting answers now that we started to apply this much pressure on people to perform and to bring these up. We got into some paper whipping issues. People were coming up and said, operator, we talked to him, it'll be better. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't get better when that happens. We held people accountable a little back. Check your process. Make sure the process isn't what's preventing them. Because in parallel with this, we were starting to incorporate standardized work. With that, it showed us all the opportunities to go fix the process of what was enabling these people to make bad product. Did we miss quality gates? Were there drawings that were incomplete, unclear, inconsistent? We found all kinds of things like that when you get to that level of detail. We now also involve the suppliers. All the defects that we had from suppliers were being fed back, and we have people responsible for getting their responses and being the supplier advocate and presenting those responses. Do you have more in shipment? What are you doing to change your quality gates to prevent any more bad parts from coming to us? What's the long-term corrective actions? Now they're involved all of a sudden. We also started to get the first level of feedback from our dealers. What are they having problems with the installations and upon first shipment to them? So now we started to expand again. Suppliers and dealers. We focused and got information back from all of those. So in the morning meeting, we could be reviewing defects from an installation of a truck in the past week, receiving inspection defects, in-process weld defects, in-process fabrication, raw material defects. It could come from anywhere. We also now had a much more of a high level of population of people involved in resolving the problems. So in about an 18 to 24 month period, we went from having quality involved, finding the defects, fixing the defects, reporting on defects, only at one spot in the end line for end customer perception, Now we're looking at every problem that we encumber on the line and all disruptions. Every shortage that we have at every operation, we go back and challenge ourselves to fix. Every receive and inspection defect, we go back. Every installation. Some days we have a lot of those, but it's gotten a lot better and easier to manage. But now we have one method that the entire organization is using to leverage our improvement. So I'll talk about the cultural aspects in a minute when we get through the details here. But it's important to understand how we evolved, and now we look back at it and says, what did we do to ourselves? We've really changed the face of how we do business. Just recently, now we're reviewing all of our warranty items. Now we're getting feedback from our end user customers. We also transitioned, instead of going to an organization where the defect was found, to assignment to the individual supervisors by name of the areas that they're responsible for, who made the defect. So we personalized it. Now it's not an organization that's responsible. Now you've got somebody's name and their manager's name with it. We kind of looked back on it and said, well, that kind of goes hand in hand. The data and the performance levels that we got after we did this was dramatic. We took another 50% off of our defect rates across the board in areas that we haven't seen improvement in 6 months. Personalizing and making it personally accountable to the person was key. But we also included the end user customers. So now we've included all breadths, the entire breadth of our operations, from suppliers down to our end users. Warranty, installations, dealer feedback, it's all there. We bring in customers, and they've given us warranty feedback. They can walk out on the floor and they can see, not only have we addressed it, but they can actually see exactly what we did to address it. Dealers who come in do the same thing. And suppliers are now attending our meetings pretty much on a weekly basis for them to give their own responses back, so we don't have to play their advocate. So they've become a working part of our methodology. And we dragged everybody in there. There isn't an organization in the building that's not involved now. We've got order entry all the way through shipping involved in coming down and address their own issues. And we've pushed back defects back up into the process where we are actually finding the order entry issues. We're finding the product configuration issues. All the things that we struggle with are finally getting addressed. In G, looks the same thing. We found all the same key enablers that we had on all the other things. So from a TPS standpoint, what it really did is it drove us back to make sure that senior management was actually acting like senior management. We had responsibilities to make this thing happen, and it kept pointing back to the same common elements. We couldn't just sit and drive the bus from our offices. We had to get out and be involved and show leadership and show that it's important to do these things. That was key. We started off this trying to identify what it is that we can simply go off and try to research and solve problems. We didn't understand where it was going to take us. We wanted to do defect ID, defect correction, reduction. That's what the morning meeting was meant to do. Very simplistic problem solving at the product line of being able to do the little things. What we find out was that there was a tactical side to it, which led into, we started to get some efficiencies from it. Since we're using one meeting, one methodology, we had a common language, and we used a single process across the factory. Initially, we had individual departments trying to do their own problem solving using their own methodologies, and we kept stepping on each other. We're all doing the right things, but not being very effective at it. We do it the same way. We helped each other out. All the goals and metrics that we put in place from a corporate level all flowed down. And so we can show this is how well we want to respond at North American level, to our individual facilities, to our individual departments, to our individual lines, and each one of those has a name on it. And you get down to the lowest level, the supervisor and the team leaders have their name on what their contribution is to the whole. They understand where they stand in that whole thing. And I'll tell you what, people don't like being on the top of the list of having the most defects or the most disruptions for their areas. It drove really good positive behavior. It also forced us to talk to each other, because we can't solve these problems on our own. Individual departments can't stand alone on these things. It forced us to have to work together. It was really neat to see the interactions occur, to have them find a root cause and find out it's somebody else and have to go and now transfer that defect or that disruption to another organization for them to go resolve. They had to rationalize why it was needed to be transferred. They did their part. It's really something they have to do. There's a negotiation skill now that has to be done. Rationalization of why it's somebody else's defect, why I need to transfer this, why I need your help to keep me, going and not having defects and problems. Because if the operations guys are having problems with tack time, and it goes back to the MEs, the manufacturing engineers, why? Why is it something that the operator can't do? Why do I need to change the process? There was a whole different set of discussions now going on that we didn't have before. At the business level, all of a sudden we saw communication that we hadn't seen before. We saw, like I said, organizations talking to one another that never talked to one another. The ops guys on the floor, now we're talking to order entry. We had the supply-based people coming up and talking with manufacturing engineering about how to solve a problem that they never would have seen a common base to talk to before. Standardization. Again, we've got one process, one methodology of doing things instead of multiples. It became a common language. Alignment. If you have one set of metrics for how well you perform from a quality standpoint, it makes it easy to be able to drive behavior to that one metric. And really it boiled down to number of disruptions per truck. It became much easier to manage the business. Involvement, like I said before, there isn't an organization in the business that can hide from this. We've dragged everybody into this one. It didn't become just a quality problem. It didn't become just an ops problem. It became a problem that the business had to address. So it really broke down some of the barriers. What we didn't expect, when we started this a couple years ago, we were looking for an answer to operational issues. We wanted to solve a few problems on the line. As we evolved, we got some tactical issues. We started to become tactical in nature of how we leverage this against the business. Now it's become a strategic part of our business plan. Now we're trying to figure out how to take this and take us a step further. We do this on our off-site business planning for a 3- and 5-year planning of how we utilize this process. And if you would have asked us 3 years ago if this would have gone to this degree, it would have just been another daily event on the floor, we probably would have chuckled as hard as we were when our advisor challenged us to be 90% better in less than 3 years in our overall defect reduction. Because that's what we did. He says, hell, we've been in business for a long time. We're pretty good. We're kind of an industry leader in the things that we do. We build tanks that last forever. Can we get 90% better than where we are? We haven't done that in 20, 25 years of trying. Well, we did. We got that good. But it became a strategic tool for us. We're just now beginning to understand how to leverage it. A couple of improvements. Just to show you, now we talked a little bit about the story. These are some of the results. I don't know if you can tell, this is really dark. Part of the improvement overall in the floor is that we went through and added about 40 lumens of lighting to the entire factory. We lit it because if we expect the operators to be able to find things, they got to see it. We also found that was a limiting factor in being able to assemble properly. So again, from a Kaizen standpoint, from the defects that we were finding, we found that there were shortcomings in the way that we ran the business that forced us to go back and react to it. But we expected people to figure out how to be effective using those types of setups. Well, we got better. We reduced 66% of floor space. We also reduced our on-hand inventory. So now we're starting to see costs and efficiencies come from these small things. Lift pumps, manifolds, a little more sophisticated, a little bit more efficient. We ran the numbers, 50% and 50%. We're freeing up floor space, and we're reducing our inventories. Transmissions. Before and after, again, 66% on both. These came from the 5S combination with the Kaizen events. The high majority of these things were recommendations by the operators on the floor. They knew the answers before we did. We just had to apply the resources and priorities to be able to go fix them. We started to see the responses on the floor was that we got more of them. But the results were there. It was dollars, and it was efficiencies. Final inspection. When we started this, we were out in this area, about 1.23 defects. Every truck had 1 to 2 defects on it when we shipped it. And that was after we thought it was good to ship. That's where we started. When we started the morning meetings here in that phase 1, every time we did something and put the process in place, so about 6 months, we got down to here. And each time we applied a change to the process, we got better. Remember, we were flat here for about 6, 7 months. We didn't know what to do different, and we changed it to be personally accountable. We dropped to 0.09 defects per truck, and that was at both the finished goods inspection and the one that was upstream for all the internal inspections, hydraulics, electronics, mechanical. Full configuration, software, the whole bit. All the functional testing was added in there back in this time frame. So it wasn't just whether or not it was pretty and didn't have any scrapes and runs in the paint. It became much more effective. In this same time frame, because we started looking at more functional things, our warranty within the first 30 to 90 days dropped also by 75%. So we realized several $1 million of savings in those areas as well. And the things that went away, loose fittings, hydraulic leaks, electrical failures because of high resistance connections because they were loose, those have gone away. Customers are happier, dealers are happier, warranty is happier. Our goal now, this was our initial goal, 90% reduction. This line here wasn't good enough. We got challenged. Said, okay, make it 95. Well, we met that. Now we got to figure out by September of 10, we got to be at 0. That's been the goal that we've been challenged with, and we're working towards that, and so far we've been meeting it. But this one metric drives all disruptions from all areas for all product. So when we talk about alignment, we talk about the simplicity. This is where we're driving. This is what we came from. We ended up here. We used to have hundreds of charts of how we were measuring our quality. We post this every month. We break it down by department. It's very clear, very evident, very simple. And it all drives the right behavior, which is the only reason you want to have metrics to begin with. 0 defect trucks. Trucks that don't have any defects at either of the 2 inspections, we started off, we thought was good. And that was only at 1 inspection. In this same time frame, we included both inspections. We're up to about 92%. we start seeing that level of goodness and the quality of the trucks being shipped out, all of a sudden we've got headcount that's available because we don't spend a whole lot of time reworking things anymore. With some of the other changes that we've made for floor space, we've been able to bring in several 100,000 more hours of work with the same headcount. And the numbers speak for themselves when we get up here. So the first 2.5 years, we had about 10,000 Kaizens submitted. On the manufacturing labor hours, we saw up to a 67% decrease in the number of labor hours it takes us to build a truck in this same time frame. So it used to take us about 36 hours to build a truck from beginning to end. We're down to 12 in some of our high volume lines. What used to take us 24, down to 8. The rework's not there. We've streamlined how we bring product to the line. We've eliminated a lot of our supply chain elements that were causing us problems. We've instituted changes that it costs us less to build a truck. One of the keys that we had to get through, remember we talked about fear? Now all of a sudden is that it used to take us 3 people to do something, now it takes us 1. What do we do with the other 2 people? People were scared of that, of what we were going to do with that. We brought more work in. We did better make-buy decisions. We drove our internal cost to produce product down to a point where we were more competitive than outsourcing. It became a spiral. Instead of a death spiral, it became a spiral of goodness. Where now, all of a sudden, we were more cost-effective than we were 4 years prior. We can bring more work in, keep more people busy. We didn't lose any headcount. In fact, we started 2 new product lines in our facility in Green that 4 years ago, we would have had to probably hire 60 people to do. We didn't hire a soul. We used the existing people, trained, seasoned people that we brought in. And that we caused us to also be more cost effective because we had people who know how to build product that's used to it. And when we bring new product in on a new product launch, they're already all set up to be effective at it. So it's spun off in very many directions. In FY07, FY08, our sales were flat, if not down a little bit. But you know what? People got a bigger bonus that year. Our net earnings were up by over 30%. So the same sales, we made more money. So if you go back to why we did it, to become profitable, in 24 months, that was the impact of these things that we did. Simple, effective, numbers spoke for themselves. We fooled ourselves. We had our advisors from Toyota come in and give us these challenges to be 90% better. We didn't react all that positive. We literally chuckled and laughed because we thought it was crazy. And we did this across the board on several different metrics that they challenged us on. And be damned if we met them all. Basic, fundamental philosophies of problem solving, work. This isn't rocket science. Now, I've been doing this for 25 years. The difference was in this facility, the entire business supported it and surrounded it, and we were driven from the outside to be better using these tools. So it's possible. What did we learn? Out of the gate, we tried to eat the whole elephant. We had all this information being thrown at us, and we tried to do it all. Toyota gave us tremendous amounts of information, tremendous amounts of challenges. It was like drinking off a fire hose. We didn't know what to do with it all. We had to go back and start over and say, let's just start simple. And that really keyed the entire process. If you would have thought that within a 24-month period, by starting with a simple Kaizen program, by starting 5S and just cleaning the shop up, and by doing finished goods inspection, that we would have ended up where we are, we had a reaction that says it's not possible. We've been much more sophisticated than this for years, and we've never gotten any better. But we did. But we had a process, we had a method to the madness, and we worked through it. But you had to start at the beginning. We couldn't start at the end. We had to force ourselves to be disciplined and start simple and build a process around it that worked for everything. Top down and bottom up. Again, like I just said, is that we had to start, yes, a few minutes. Top down, bottom up. Management had to be involved, but we also had to get the grassroots level core processes started. One by one. This has been one of the mantras from our advisors. Solve every problem, put it behind you, and go to the next one. Don't get overwhelmed with the volume of things that you find, because part of the process is finding them. If you hide the problems, you will not solve them. Make everyone visual, make it evident, and make everybody see them. Never hide a defect. Never hide an opportunity to improve. Because the minute you do, you lie to yourself and you won't solve that problem. You're willing to accept it. That was a huge change in culture. Speed is key. When you have an opportunity to fix something, fix it fast, fix it thoroughly. Show responsiveness. Show that it's important. The defect or the disruption that you ignore and you allow to fester is one you send the message on, is that it's not important. Never expect anything less than that time frame that we're trying to do. 24 to 48 hours. Strong management. One of the things we've learned is we have to be involved. We have to be there every day. It's easy to say, geez, I'm just too damn busy to get out there this morning. It's 8:15. I got a lot of stuff to do. Those are the days that you send the message that this whole process isn't important. Have to be consistent, have to show it's important. You have to lead, you have to send the expectation that it's got to be done right. So you got to show up and participate. This is key. One of the things we failed at when we tried to do these things is that, geez, we got told, you do this just like this, it works in Takahama. Do it just like this, it works just in some of the other North American Toyota facilities. And we tried to copy it and do it exact. It doesn't work. You truly have to understand your business, your own personality of how you do business, and figure out how to incorporate these concepts into your business and make it your own and make it effective. We tried to do things like, in Takahama, it was not unusual for an individual operator who made 3 mistakes to have to get up on the board in a morning meeting with all of his peers, and the manager would have to sign on the board, I will not do this again. That didn't go over very well with some of our operators on the floor. Our culture just wasn't there. We did that twice, and we stopped that one. For fear of our own life, I think it was. But you have to understand your business. You have to understand your workforce. You have to understand how you do things day to day and work within that. You have to take it and make it your own. And because I got to come back to the title of the presentation, the culture. That's Webster's definition. We changed our behaviors. We changed our beliefs and the characteristics of how we do business. That's what the process enabled us to do and do it effectively. So I guess we changed our culture. Our dealers see it, our customers see it, we see it. Our suppliers are seeing it, and they're being dragged through it too, because we're trying to extend this back down to them. We've changed the way we do business. We're a different company. Our culture has changed. I believe it has become much more positive, much stronger, and is only going to be the building blocks for us to improve in the future. So, started small, it's grown a life of its own. So, any questions?
Just a couple real quick. The first one is, how long does that morning process take?
We limit ourselves to half an hour. We do not try to make that into a problem-solving session, but a status meeting. We expect a lot of the work to be done offline. The question was how long the morning meeting was. I'm sorry. We have a timer, 30-minute hard stop.
Okay. The second question real quick is, you mentioned about opening up footprint. How are you keeping that footprint open, the sales being flat?
As we have, right now, we're insourcing more and more product as we're doing a different make-buy decision of what initially was outsourced 4 years ago. We're now proving to ourselves of becoming more cost-effective. We're filling the factory now, and we have 6 major projects of bringing in additional sheet and rail product, and we're also building more product for our sister sites. So we've expanded our rail cell by almost 600% in volume, and we're now going to build all of our hydraulic cylinders for the masts internally for all of our facilities, not just our own. So we're filling it from within.
Did you develop a reporting matrix that made it quick and simple for people to report information to go to the meeting, or is it kind of freewheeling and ad hoc type of thing?
We created a structure of how we hold a meeting, we report the details and the metrics. We do daily metrics, so people see exactly where we are in any one day and how they fit into the picture for those metrics. But yes, that was important, and it still is.
Is this morning meeting one meeting, or is there multiple meetings in different production areas? How's that go?
We have one meeting in the morning that incorporates all organizations. Now, there are spin-offs to those as they want to work different issues within their own organizations. There's one meeting that we all attend and we all see the same thing. Whoever has got the mic.
My question is broader. You mentioned that you got the engine going. You have one facility, several functional areas. Were there certain areas that were more in tune, more involved, and other areas that lagged behind? And how did you deal with those areas that didn't really want to participate in this cultural change?
Part of that, I'll answer that twofold. Number one is that the personalization of having to stand up in front of your peers is a very strong influential factor. If you do not participate and there's an expectation where you get handed the microphone in the morning to be able to talk to your defects and you don't have anything, it has a tendency to drive some behavior. Number two, that's where the strong management comes in. There were some people that just did not choose to be involved in the way that it was the right thing to do, and those actions were taken appropriately. There were situations that did come to that. Again, the strong management had to take place. This was not something that was everybody's strong point. And there were some very strong beliefs in the way the business had been done for 30 years for people that had been there that we had to work on. But some of those people that had the 30 years of doing things differently are now some of the biggest advocates we have, now that we had the light bulb go on.
The morning meeting that you had, this involved all of the hourly operators also? You took the whole plant down?
No, what we did is the plant keeps running, primarily senior management, the team leaders, and on up. So we have team leaders and supervisors, people who are solving the problems. We would bring key operators in when it was necessary to discuss a problem that they had found or were involved with. So we'd selectively bring people in. That area is a working area. There's a series of boards that we set up. I apologize. I can send those out. I can bring those in. I've actually got some videos of that as well that show them how the meeting actually occurring. And there's a whiteboard with charts and data for each individual department. Those end up being working areas for each individual organization to go back and look at and work to. So it becomes a centralized focus of where the data is, and that you can take your operators into your functional areas. They hold pretty much daily meetings after the fact for the issues that they had in hand in their areas. So it became a centralized work area for doing that.
With all this new information coming into the technical departments, engineering, quality, and all that, how did you handle the resource constraints?
As well as we could. Engineering traditionally in our organizations had been predominantly focused on new product introduction and modifications for new. About 30% of our trucks are custom engineered, and so we get a a request from the field from a customer who wants something a little different. We've primarily been focused on that. There had been traditionally very few resources assigned to support the production areas from an engineering standpoint. And so this was a new challenge for us to try to figure out how to structure internally not only the right resources, but the ability to respond on a timely basis in those same areas. So we had to go back and restructure around it and apply and dedicate resources in support of this. So
Did you increase the engineering departments, and was it significant?
It wasn't significant. We utilized the same resources. We just had to shuffle the deck a little bit and be able to say this is important. And you know what? We found things that we were doing just like any place else, but if we stopped doing it, it didn't matter. So it forced us to go back and really look at how we ran our business. We found the time. We found the right resources, and we found the right expertise to solve the problems. And the thing is, like anything else that we talked about, once we started solving those problems, we found out that it resolved other issues in the custom engineering areas that we didn't expect. Problems that we've been living with for years, all of a sudden weren't there anymore. So we found other second, third level benefits from solving the problems on the floor, also work backwards in engineering to things that we don't have to go back and resolve again. So over 6 months to a year, we're at a much more comfortable level with the same people where we saw the efficiencies go up. But yes, in the beginning, it was painful because people were doing things they'd never had to do before.